Good morning, everybody. It is great to see you all here. When I proposed this, I was a little I will admit to a little bit of anxiety thinking there will be no one that does not know Postgres at a Postgres conference. But the, the, uh, the selection team had faith in me, and I'm very happy for that. How many of you are genuinely new to Postgres as opposed to people that are sitting here hoping that the Wi-Fi will be more accessible in this room rather than some other room? Okay, good. So good. This is the newbie the newbie orientation is basically how I put this. You're going to be There are going to be a lot of sessions at this conference where they're going to throw a lot of terminology around you that will make you feel like you've just been dropped in the pool in the deep end and have to swim. And so this will hopefully move you down the field a little bit. First off, I do want to wish you all welcome. We are very glad that you're here at Postgres Open. You got to start sometime. And the Postgres Open people are, and the Postgres community in general, one of the really neat things about it is how open and welcoming the people are. When I first got into Postgres at an OzCon in San Diego in '02, something like that, I remember sitting on an inflatable couch between Bruce Momgen and Tom Lane, and I could not believe how they were actually speaking to a humble nobody like me. Talk to the speakers. Talk to folks. They are all very happy to talk to you about Postgres. Speaking of that, one of the big things when you're new to Postgres is figuring out what our name is. The official project name is PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL. The official accepted alias is Postgres. You will notice that at this conference, the conference isn't PostgreSQL Open, it's Postgres Open. You'll notice that in the keynote this morning, EDB always referred to it as Postgres. A lot of people are trying to make sure that Postgres is how we say it now. For as welcoming as the Postgres community is, there can be a lot of people that get grumpy when you say something that the thing is not, or when you type something it is not. The capitalization matters, okay? It is SQL in all caps at the end. There is not, and I see this an awfully surprising amount, PostgreSQL. There's that little cap G in there. That is also not it. Including the variant when you drop the QL, but you capitalize the G. This is random. This is also one that you will see people, I don't know if they're French or what, but people will say just Postgre. No. Postgres. With the S at the end. Sometimes you'll see people go PostgreSQL, and immediately you know that they're not with the project. PostgreSQL. It's also not the name of the application that you use to access it. We use the command line psql to access it, and so sometimes you'll see people say, "Oh, I was running psql or PSQL or something like that." It is not that. It's not PGSQL. It's not PGAdmin or PHP PGAdmin. Again, that's a program used to access Postgres, not Postgres itself. In case you haven't gone to Wikipedia and looked this up on your own or looked through the webpage and thing, I'm gonna really quickly take you through how we got to this point. PostgreSQL was developed in the 80s as a spin-off of Ingress at Berkeley. That's the INGRES. And thus, because it was a spin-off of Ingress, its post Ingres, which then became Postgres. And for about 6 to 8 years in a surprisingly long time ago, the name of the project was Postgres. And for a short time, it was Postgres 95. A really short window. Those of you who are Windows 95 fans will enjoy that. Since 96, however, it's been PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL. It sounds so easy to say. PostgreSQL. But it is surprisingly controversial. That 96 version of PostgreSQL was the 6.0 version. Since we're talking about version numbers, you might have wondered, what is the deal with all these version numbers? If you go to postgres.org, there are four different active release numbers right now. And you've got number, dot number, dot number. And you might ask yourself what that means. The first two numbers now we're referring to as major releases. This did not always used to entirely be the case. This is a relatively new adjustment to how we look at Postgres release numbers. Now that we've been releasing Postgres about every year, or 15 months, depending on how you look at it, but roughly every year. We like to say we release a new major version of Postgres every year-ish. Now that we've been doing that for the past 4-ish years to 5-ish years, now that we've been doing that, we call these the major releases. Major releases have new functionality, significant new functionality every year, to 12 to 15 months. Every time period, you are adding a slew of really interesting features and improving performance of this database. We are one of the few databases that you can say every year you're getting a brand spanking new improvement and you're not paying for it at all. Used to be that the big numbers were the milestone releases. So you had 6.0 in 96. You had 7.0 that came out, which gave you foreign keys and a better SQL standard join syntax. You had the native Windows version, 8.0, that came out. This was huge for the Postgres project. For the people that have been around the Postgres project since before 8.0, it was actually very surprising just how big the release of 8 made Postgres. For a database that frankly was Unix and Linux based before that point, having a native Windows version completely changed the game for us. 9.0 series introduced binary replication and the start of the every year we're going to give kind of a major release process. These big numbers used to require a DB dump and restore. You had to stop everything, take it down, dump everything down, and then load the new thing and reload it all before you were doing it, because there were actual significant architectural changes between the big milestone releases. At this point, that is no longer the case, blessedly, because it used to be a real pain in the butt making these changes. So you might have asked, what's the other number? Those other numbers, the last number, these are bug fixes or security updates. The last numbers, these are the ones you can kind of install. They could come out at any point, and generally speaking, they are usually a good idea to install them as soon as you can. They do not usually, as far as I know, they do not require you to completely stop everything and dump the database down to text and make copies and all this kind of stuff. the update process is much better than it used to be. For people that, when you're talking to folks that have been around the Postgres project a lot, you'll often hear that of, boy, it's much better than it used to be. Sometimes people ask, who owns Postgres? What company? I go to this conference and I see Enterprise DB. I see all these people. Who actually owns Postgres? And of course, the answer is nobody owns Postgres. Postgres is a collaborative open source project. You have many developers and companies that are contributing code to Postgres all the time. It's a global development project. One of the fantastic things about Postgres is that we have incredible programming teams in Russia, in Japan, all over the world that are really doing incredible work on this database and helping us quite a bit. There is a core team. I am not it. You can go to postgres.org/community/contributors, and they list the core team. They list the major contributors. There are, I think, right now 6 core team members, at least one of whom is here. Did Tom make it to open this year? Do you know, or no? You're shaking your head as if you don't know, or that you. Okay, cool. But Bruce, if you get to talk to Bruce is a core team guy. Again, it's a remarkable project in that the core team is accessible. They are nice people. They will not flame the newbie if you have a question to you. They will answer your questions seriously and compassionately. It is a safe space, which not all open source projects are like that. And it's one of the things that I personally love about this group, this community, is how open the core team is. Postgres has its own license, the PostgreSQL license. It's similar to a BSD or an MIT license. It's a very, very open license. Where can you get help when you have questions about Postgres? There are, fortunately, lots of places that you can get help. There's the website, postgresql.org. There are the docs that are located off of postgres.org. We have really awesome doc pages. They are very, very good doc pages. They are specific for even the various point releases that are out right now. There is a 9.3 set, there is a 9.2 set, a 9.1 set, a 9.0 set. Very, very highly recommend browsing through the doc pages if you have a question about any aspect of functionality in Postgres. There's also a wiki, wiki.postgresql.org. I highly recommend the wiki. We use it to keep a lot of advocacy material on there, but the FAQ on the wiki is very, very good. There are mailing lists. A lot of the work of Postgres occurs on mailing lists, especially for the developers. I recommend that you look at PGSQL Novice. Let me slide that cursor off of the thing so it doesn't do that. Also PGSQL General and PGSQL SQL are all very good. Advocacy is also a nice place to come if you have questions about the promotion or ideas about how you would like to help promote Postgres. If you go away from Chicago going, I'd really like to help more people know about Postgres, pop in on PGSQL advocacy, and we will love the help. Also, if you are curious about Postgres jobs or wish to post PostgreSQL jobs, you can look at the jobs mailing list. There are also developer-specific mailing lists. While our community is very open and welcoming, the developer lists are where a lot of work get done, so I would not recommend them as kind of safe for newbies at this point. Just a word of caution. Remember that you are entering a community. You are going into someone's house when you go into a mailing list. It might be a large house, but it is still someone's home. the home for a group of people. So please, they do request that you read as much as possible in the docs in advance before you ask your question or questions, and include as much information as possible. People that come in saying, hey, I've got a problem, you guys, and are not specific about anything, they may not be welcomed as graciously as folks that come in and say, hey, I've had a problem with XYZ. I've been looking at the doc pages on XYZ, and it says to do this, and I tried to do this with this configuration, but it's giving me this specific error message. Can anyone help me? And at that point, Tom Lane, who never sleeps and sees all, will probably jump on and give you, within 15 seconds, an answer to your statement, and you will say, man, that guy is amazing. Also, IRC. A lot of Postgres stuff gets done on both the mailing lists and on IRC. It's the PostgreSQL channel on Freenode, irc.freenode.net. Hopefully you work for an employer that does not block IRC at the perimeter like some others of us do. But a lot of great stuff gets done on IRC, and it's a good place to go if you have a quick question. There are also language-specific IRC channels for non-English speakers and a help bot. Often if someone comes on and asks a question that they get a lot of, you'll see someone else fire off a query to the help bot, and it will spit out a pre-packaged FAQ for you. Again, you are entering someone's living room at that point, someone's noisy living room. IRC is very talky, very chatty, very noisy. So please read as much as possible, include as much information as possible, and especially on IRC, go into the channel and just watch for a little bit. Wait for a lull in the conversation. Wait for them to stop, poking someone else. If there is a joke that has been delivered, do not ask your question before the punchline. Wait for the punchline, wait for the reaction to clear, and then slide your question in. And it will go much more easily for you. Again, it's a lot better than it used to be. A lot nicer than it used to be. But it's always pretty nice. Also, you might be wondering, hey, it's 2014. What kind of social media does Postgres go on? Yeah, well, there's Planet, PostgreSQL.org. It has a Twitter feed. If you are on Twitter, you should please subscribe to the Planet Postgres. Go ahead and follow this. It will by far make your life easier because you will see a lot of really good things coming up there. After this, there's not a whole lot of social media stuff that we do. Oh, that's right, there's a Google Plus account because Google Plus still exists. We do have a Google Plus account. I do follow it on Google Plus, and like probably a lot of you, I never really look at it, so I don't really. I'm sure they do a lot of really great stuff on Postgres Plus, but I don't know what it is. No, seriously, this is a place where Postgres could do a little bit better, and those of you who do a lot of social media work, advocacy can certainly use your help in helping our social outreach. I don't even know, do we have a Facebook page? Yeah, everyone's like, who knows? Yeah, so not as social as it could be for 2014, but definitely follow Planet. There are also conferences. You are, of course, at the local big conference. There is PGCon, which is a large international conference. It's been going on for, over 10 years now. It is the longest existing Postgres conference. It's in Ottawa, Canada. Next year's will be in, I want to say late June. They've shifted it. It used to be in late May, but we kept running up against the Memorial Day celebrations, and Canada has They have a holiday that I can't remember that is very big, and we kept running into that. We kept running into there were marathon runners and stuff going on, and so they finally moved PGCon to mid to late June. Postgres Open is a wonderful conference. As I said this morning, this is year 4 for Postgres Open. It's by far the largest U.S. conference at this point. Longest running. I was okay, yeah. I was also thinking in terms of it's a 3-day conference versus New York, I think, is a 2-day. I don't know. But anyway, there are other international conferences. If you like to travel, there's PGEU. They've got one coming up in, I think, Brazil, or either Brazil or Cuba. I'm not sure which. If you watch Planet, you'll see announcements for these coming across. Also, the regional PG days. There's an NYC conference in New York that's going to be really big every year. And Postgres does have a presence at non-Postgres specific conferences such as OSCON or some of the other ones. This is, you will have more Postgres content at the Postgres conferences, as one might expect. Also, Postgres user groups. There are a ton of Postgres user groups, and they grow every day. Some of them are inactive, but most of them do have mailing lists and or meetup groups. The pugs especially do a lot of work on Meetup. Some of the pugs have started doing Google Hangouts and or live broadcasts. San Francisco, for example, has been doing a lot of remote broadcasts of their meetings, their monthly meetings, and it's pretty cool. Some of them also host these PG days that we just talked about. I have to put in a plug for the United States PostgreSQL Association, or PGUS. We, and I do say we, give financial support to pugs. We are looking into grants for specific development items, and they're hot to go now on offering Google Hangouts on various topics. I do say we because I've been on the board of this guy for a while now. PGUS, go team go. I strongly recommend looking into the things that the United States PostgreSQL Association, or postgresql.us, is doing. So that's about as much background as I can give you guys. I do recommend looking at the FAQ. I do recommend looking at the Wikipedia page. They will all have more on the history of Postgres. Right now, I'm going to shift this to a collection, this kind of a random grab bag of tips, notes, and stuff that I wish that I'd had when I started with Postgres 13 years ago. So this is not kind of instant expert level. This is just a collection of random stuff that was useful to me. So your mileage is definitely going to vary on this as to how useful any of these tools are for you. But I hope that some of this stuff will help ease that transition. Now, some of you mentioned that being new to Postgres. Are you using the command line editor for Postgres now, or are you using some kind of graphical user interface to Postgres? Command line? Yeah. Yeah, a good mix of the various things. How many of you are, here's a fun question. How many of you are here learning about Postgres and haven't actually used Postgres yet? Okay, so a few of you. So this will be kind of a good glimpse into how we do things for y'all as well. There are some standard things that you really should understand about Postgres. Postgres, its main bread and butter, we used to refer to it kind of as the Volvo of the databases, where it's extremely concerned about the safety of your data. Above everything else with Postgres, it's optimized for data integrity first, ACID first, all that kind of stuff. So if you're going to use Postgres, hopefully you understand transactions. Hopefully you'll understand what the term race condition can mean. Postgres uses MVCC as its way of managing concurrency control. You might want, if you haven't heard of MVCC, this is not the lecture for that. Just look at the pages, it will tell you about it. You'll want to eventually learn about Postgres locks and isolation levels. And it should go without saying, but you should probably understand what I mean when I say acid. Is there anyone in here who does not understand what the acid thing means? I don't mean to embarrass anybody. Okay. And this is the point where everyone else in the room kind of checks out and checks Facebook for just a second. Acid is atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. It's a set of 4 properties that, in general, a well-behaved database should be. In terms of atomicity, a transaction, when it takes place, should only see, atom. It only sees itself. It all happens all at once. Consistency, you want the database to be in a consistent state, both before and after a transaction happens. Isolation, a transaction shouldn't see anything outside of its transaction that it shouldn't see, basically. Durability, if you make a change to the database, it stays changed. These all might seem like, well, why wouldn't a database do this? And you will find that there are other databases that have made other choices over the years. Some of them have prioritized speed over, whether a database should recognize February 31st as a valid date or something like that. These are various choices that people have gone into. And Postgres is always extremely concerned with the reliability of your data. Now it's, and we used to call it Volvo, and now it's like a really fast Volvo because, again, things have changed over the years. And Postgres is incredibly faster now than it's ever been. You should also understand what nulls are. It will help your life tremendously if you understand what the concept of nulls in a database is. What do they mean? How do they affect the logic of queries? Because nulls have specific effects on various things, including concatenation. If you are not used to dealing with nulls, concatenation, taking a string and concatenating it to another string value. If you have a null in there, all of a sudden things go boom, and you might not know how this works. So coalesce. It's not on my slides, but if you've not dealt with nulls before, look up the coalesce keyword on the Postgres doc sites, and coalesce is going to be your new best friend. Also understand how nulls affect joins and join logic. And there's this one little kind of thing. If you have columns that, when you're doing reports, if you're looking for specific values and nulls could be in there, you'll often find that you'll have to add an or null at the end of your, at the end of your condition to get it to work properly. At least I have found. Speaking of joins, you probably will need to at some point familiarize yourselves with how left, right, outer, and full joins work. There are some wonderful little Venn diagrams that take like 2 overlapping circles, and you'll see what the various joins mean in terms of what parts of the circles you're trying to pull. Also, be able to recognize a Cartesian cross product. I heard Bruce Momgen in his talk right before this make a casual reference to a Cartesian cross product. How many of you don't know what I mean when I say Cartesian cross product? Yeah, it's entirely, you can shoot that hand on up, don't be embarrassed. How many of you do not understand what I mean when I say Cartesian cross product? Yeah. So a Cartesian cross product is what occurs when you have 2 tables, generally when you have 2 tables, And everything in table A is paired with everything in table B. So you get a result that is like, you have a table of apples, you have a table of oranges, and you have every apple with every orange. And you see this result when it comes out. And the key thing, when you see a Cartesian cross product, it almost certainly means that there's something is happening in a join that you don't want. You are failing to limit or give some kind of join condition has been dropped off, and it's just giving you everything mixed up. So when you see one, unless you actually asked for it, it's generally a kind of a signal that something went terribly, terribly wrong in the query. You need to be diligent about referential integrity. Postgres is all about referential integrity, setting up your schema in a way where you know what your data is and what it should be, what the range of values should be, and especially foreign keys. You're going to want to set up on-update cascade for your foreign keys. When you're declaring it in a table, what on-update cascade does is it means that should you change for whatever reason, should you change the primary key of a table, that update will be cascaded to every table that references it automatically without you having to do anything for it. Granted, there are pedagogical arguments about databases and how primary keys should never have any value. There should never be any kind of extra intrinsic metadata to a primary key of a table. It should always just be a pure, unfiltered integer, and that is true. But it's also the case that usually you'll just have to update a primary key for whatever reason. And when you do that, if you've set up your database correctly, you will issue one update statement rather than, okay, let me look at the docs, let me see where every table that refers to this thing is, and let me issue an update statement on every other thing. You don't have to do that in code. You don't have to do that anywhere else. It's all really quick and simple and wonderful. Indices. Postgres has a ton of different index types, including, aside from just the standard ones you would expect, you get multi-column indices, you get partial indices, and you get functional indices. A partial index is an index on just part of your table. A functional index is an index, like it says, it's an index based on a function. So if you are always taking part of your data and saying, okay, give me this particular business process logic on this column, you can actually create an index in Postgres that will just work on that logic. And as you might suspect, that will tremendously speed up response time. Also, you can name these indices. And these names are the names that will come back when you're when you're analyzing your data or when things go boom. And so when you name your indices, please, please, please name them something that you can recognize later or something that the next person can recognize later on down the road. Something preferably that they can recognize at 3 in the morning when they're digging through stuff. You will probably also at some point, depending on your application, depending on performance, depending on your needs, you will probably want to add indices to foreign key tables. So if you have a table that does some kind of many-to-many or one-to-many or many-to-one kind of relationship, and it's just a separate table out there, you will probably at some point say, hey, I should put an index on the foreign key, just a standard index on the foreign key of that table. You might have thought, like I did for the first year or so that I used Postgres, that it would just do that automatically. It does not. The query optimizer is very smart about things, and it will go through and fix a lot of things, but it will not add that foreign key index. So if you're doing a lot of joins, if you're doing a lot of filters on columns where you have to say, just give me help desk tickets of this user, something like that, you're going to want to put a column on those foreign key on the foreign key columns of those tables. Constraints. Uniqueness constraints are fantastically useful, especially for multi-column constraints. Uniqueness constraints, if you've ever done any kind of voting application or other kind of thing where you have an extensive series of transactions, these will save you. So please look up the constraint logic on the docs pages. And again, you can name them. And these especially will be the ones that will fire off errors into your Postgres error log or something like that. So please give them names that make sense and that you can read and parse. If you are coming to Postgres from other databases, especially Microsoft databases, you might have questions about how do I, in terms of making primary key tables with primary keys, how do I make kind of an auto-incrementing column for those primary keys? And we do that through the serial data type. It's not a real type. It's hiding some stuff from you behind the scenes. But you will declare a column ID, serial primary key. And that's all you have to do. This creates a sequence that will automatically generate numbers, integer numbers, and it works really, really nicely. So this is your auto number equivalent. It's an auto incrementing thing. It's transaction safe. You're not going to accidentally get two of the same kind of primary key. You are safe with the serial data type, and you don't have to manage it yourself. That being said, because of it being safe and transaction safe, if anything happens, like an insert, when you're inserting into that table and something fails, you don't get to reuse that key. It's kind of a they are the serial keys. You use them and they're done. You use it, you use the next one and it's done. Use the next one and it's done. So you will occasionally have gaps in the sequence when a transaction didn't work, so it didn't set up as something, but it can't use this key anymore. They're done. So depending on how much your clients care about those numbers lining up perfectly, you might have some other decisions to make. Some notes when you're using the command line PSQL, which I use, and I love using PSQL. There are several things that will be your best friends. \L tells you what all the databases are in your system. \DT will tell you what the tables are in the database you're in. \Z will tell you the permissions of what the various objects are. Now this is a little, \Z, if you've never used it before, will kind of be like, whoa, hey, because it's not just database tables, it's also the sequences on those primary keys. It will show you. \X is useful for toggling between kind of a show me everything, select star from this table. The default will be to show you row by row by row by row by row and just kind of pile on top of each other. \X will give you like column name colon attribute value, column name colon attribute value, column name colon attribute value. So you'll actually look like a record a page at a time. And so if you have a schema that is particularly wide, you will almost certainly want to use \X because the standard select star and stuff, it'll give you everything kind of in 40 characters or less, and you kind of have to count columns and go, okay, which one is this? Also, \?, whenever you have questions or you just can't remember any of the other commands, I highly recommend that. You will also, if you're using PSQL, you will probably at some point be using SQL files in and out. This is from the general shell prompt. You'll say something like PSQL -f, and then the name of the file that you're reading in, -lowercase o, the name you might read it out to, and then the name of the database itself. There are several more advanced areas of that you're going to get a glimpse of this week. You're going to hear people talking about it, or you've been working with Postgres yourself, and you're going to, or maybe you haven't seen these yet, and you want to know, hey, how can I expand my knowledge? How better can I look into Postgres and find out more of the really neat things that Postgres is doing these days? Generate underscore series is one. It's a method of basically going generate series 1 to 1,000. I want to iteratively do something. And you can do this in Postgres SQL. We have range types now, where you can actually define as a type something is going to be a range of values. These are very neat. I like writing SQL that writes in and of itself SQL. This is just a hobby of mine. It helps me when I have to migrate data, or when I have to do some kind of bulk transform to a data that perhaps I can't do just in SQL alone, because I want to look at it and make sure it's okay. So I will write SQL that writes out SQL that I can look at, slap in a transaction, and then put off on itself. Highly recommend playing with writing SQL that writes SQL. Common table expressions. If you were at Bruce's talk this morning, he really quickly kind of flew through and used these little with statements to create, and these are called common table expressions. Highly recommend looking up with statements, common table expressions. They're very useful for defining, for kind of redefine, on these situations where normally you would use like a subquery or a sub-subquery, and the logic gets a little convoluted. With statements allow you to kind of define a new little table and make references to that. I am, of course, way generalizing here, but you will see people talk about foreign data wrappers or SQL med. I think the first 12 times I saw references to SQL med, I thought it was some kind of medical database, but it's not. It has nothing to do with some kind of brand new Postgres initiative into healthcare. The MED stands for Management of External Data. Foreign data wrappers are incredibly cool. It enables you to define a foreign data source as a Postgres table. So you can run selects off of a CSV file, Twitter, another Postgres database, a MySQL database, some other data store, and you can execute SQL against it as if it were in your own database. This is as one might imagine, this is very revolutionary, and yeah.
So like you
thank you, 5.
A CSV, for example. So is that like a reasonable alternative to importing a CSV into the database?
You could. Setting up foreign data wrappers takes a little. It's not kind of point and click at this point. And so depending on what it is. But yeah, when you get more comfortable with them, that might be something that you choose to do. It's also something that it makes upgrades easier, makes backups easier. It completely revolutionizes a lot of what we're doing. PostGIS, look this up. This is tremendous. It's brought a lot of people to Postgres. It's wonderful. We're getting really near the end, so I'm going to kind of fly through the rest of these slides. Also, Postgres now does JSON, and as of a month or so from now, whenever we actually release 9.4, you're going to have JSON-B, binary JSON functionality in 9.4. This is the new hotness. This is what all the kids are doing these days. JSON is big and huge. It replaces, well, it supplements the XML support that Postgres was doing. That was the hotness 5 years ago, when everyone was talking about XML databases, and we said, okay, here you go. Now everyone is talking about JSON in the database, and hey, here you go. Also, all the various programming languages, when you're writing functions inside there. There are a tremendous, stunning diversity of programming languages. You don't just program in regular PostgreSQL. You can write SQL functions in C, in Perl, in PHP, in JavaScript, and in something that you're going to see in a little bit. There's one other thing that I'll save as a punchline here. Also, while you're Googling stuff, look up tuning the Postgres configuration files. Tuning Postgres is always kind of something that people talk about because Postgres is so powerful and does so many different things. And you get one config setting. So you should look up the various presentations on how to tune your Postgres. You will be curious at some point as to where space requirements. So I highly recommend looking up, again, Googling, show your Postgres table size, database table size. It's on our wiki. There are actual queries that you can cut and paste into your code and say, hey, this database takes up this much room. Google for index bloat, and you'll see a scary, absolutely scary set of SQL, long SQL. And that's kind of fun to frighten people on when it's almost October. PGXN, it's PG extensions. It's kind of like CPAN, but for Postgres. It's an attempt at making it easier to install some of the extra stuff for Postgres. And the final programming language, someone actually wrote a law code implementation as a database as a Postgres database programming language. So you could say can has database, has more, and it is, wow, I can control the volume from this little thing. That is awesome. I highly recommend Googling and looking up the Postgres, this particular quote, Postgres space PL/law code. You'll see Selena's stuff on that. It's really fun. Do you have any questions? Yes.
A really basic question. I still haven't quite figured out how to do like batch processing of data quickly, like something as simple as just say importing a bunch of CSVs without creating schemas for each one first, things like that.
I can't answer that in the minute we have left. Sorry. Talk to me after. I'm sorry. Other questions that hopefully do not take a long time to answer in the negative 1 minute we have left. Yes?
Sorry, so something we're looking at is tracking common vulnerabilities like CVEs.
Okay.
I didn't notice if there's like a specific mailing list that shows something, here's a vulnerability, you're going to want to apply this minor update. Is there something like that?
You'll want to, again, Planet Postgres, follow that on Twitter. Generally, if there are security announcements, they'll be echoed there. Also, let me go back to the mailing lists. Whee! The specific mailing list you want, I believe, is general. Announce. Does PG Announce also do those, or is it general? Whee! I made a lot of slides. Sorry. Yeah, I'd say PGSQL-general. If there's a, we used to use -announce for that, but announce was never. We're all volunteers, and so sometimes things wouldn't get out there. But I would say follow general. I don't know if Novice would actually get one of those announcements, but yeah. And Planet. Definitely, a big takeaway for everybody should be follow Planet.
So Planet's one of the most up-to-date sources for something like that.
Yeah, by far.
Thank you.
There's new content on Planet almost every day, and since I say almost every day, that means you're not going to get like 50 a day. It's like most days 0, some days 1, some days 3, most days 0. but it's an exceptional way to tune into what's going on in the Postgres community. And if you have a blog and want to contribute to Planet, they would be happy to there's information on planet.postgresql.org about how to get your blog linked in on that as well. Any other questions? We have a fantastic lunch for you today, I am sure. Go yawn and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everybody. Scroll forward to the thanks slide. On Twitter, I am operatic on Twitter. I run protected, so if you add me, try to figure out a way of letting me know who you are or warning me before you add me, because I'll get the hint if your bio says something about Postgres that this is how I know you, but in general, I run real quiet on Twitter. So, but yeah, operatic on Twitter. Planet Postgres on Twitter. Follow it on there. Thanks, everybody.